I want to talk to you about what I'm expecting you to do for the profile paper for Calligraph. So a profile paper is sometimes called a pattern paper or a class analysis or a generic analysis paper. I know generic analysis sounds kind of weird, but it's talking about genre. What makes a thing a member of a class? Okay, so when I ask you to write a profile paper for me, that's exactly what I'm asking you to do is to look at a certain class, to look at the individual members of the class, and from those individual members to go ahead and abstract out or to list out the general characteristics that that class shares. All right. Now, this is a great technique for writing a research paper because you can pick certain items that might not have had this done to them, if you will, or you can challenge the way somebody has written about the average, whatever. Take your pick. For example, you can see I've got a lot of movies here. Okay, what if I had 10 movies, right, that all talked about um, in some way of families struggling with a great emotional pain, all right, within their family. And I might be able to look at the 10 movies and say, look, every single one of these obviously has a family involved. Every single one obviously has emotional pain, some sort of traumatic event that they're going through. And you might be saying, well, that's kind of obvious just by the definition of the class, right? And I would be, yes, you're right. These characteristics you have to have. I mean, it has to be a movie, right? I mean, every single thing in this class is going to share this defining or essential characteristic. So sometimes that's those sorts of characteristics are very easy to write and to see, so you don't really have to spend a lot of time on them. Sometimes they're not so easy. For example, if I were to ask you to think about all the objects in your life that that you would call a chair, okay, chair, chair, the thing you sit on. Um, what would you put into that class? And can you imagine a member in the class that doesn't have some of the characteristics that other of those members have? For example, you might think of a very common chair with four legs, sort of a seat, and a back, an upright back. Okay, there you go. But as I was mentioning, bringing this example to us, I said chair, I spelled it, and then I said the thing you sit on. Well, we can sit on a lot of things. I'm sitting on what you would consider to be a traditional chair, right? But then I could easily, and this camera's on sort of a table. I could easily switch that. I could put the camera on the chair and I could sit on the table. So I'm sitting on this thing. Is that going to be a chair? Because chairs are things we sit on. So it gets tricky actually. Chair is one of these favorite examples for philosophy classes because when you actually try to define what is a chair, it gets a lot harder as you keep on going. Same thing with life. Same thing with thinking. Like if you were to define everything that is a thinking being, okay, be interesting, right? Because do plants think? And I would refer you to a book called The Secret Life of Plants. Very interesting book. Um, most of us would say plants don't think, but the thesis of that book is that indeed they do. Um, and do computers think? Now, computers can calculate, but can they think? Right. So all of a sudden, it's sort of like a definition paper. It's you're trying to put people into that class. And so before you can put or things into that class, and before you can do that, you really have to understand what thinking means, right? And then once you have the members of the class there, you can write a paper describing the average class member. All right. So you, let me just take a really quick time out here and say we've been doing this all our lives. You are very good at this. All right. It's just that now it's time to practice with it in a way that makes you aware of your skill because I want you to write an essay, using this technique of looking at individual members, and then trying to draw out the characteristics that they share. Okay. So in order to do this, I want us to practice with the stories that are in Calligraph. So Calligraph is that workbook that I asked you to buy from Open Latch Education Foundation in Maryville, Tennessee. You go directly to their website, um, openlatch.org, O-R-G, and then click on the text distribution little icon they have there, and get to the workbook section and buy. I think it was bundle 5, but anyway, those instructions as to how to get the books, they were in like week 1. Okay, now it's time to use Calligraph, and what you need to do is you need to read the first 5 stories, and then I want you to start thinking about the characteristics those stories share. Now, it's very important you understand that I'm not asking you to write a profile paper on the American short story or short stories in general, because we need many, many more than just 5. But here, Calligraph, I think, has only 10 or 12 stories. And just to make this assignment quick and doable, I'm just asking you to work with the first 5. All right. And we're going to take that as a representative sample. That's about 50%. And what we're going to do then is we're going to say, what's the majority of the representative sample? So I want you to find characteristics that appear in at least 3 of the 5 stories. Now, they can be any 3 of the 5, but they need to show up in at least 3. Some characteristics that you find are going to show up in 4, and some are going to show up in all 5. But that's not going to be a lot. But there'll be quite a good number that show up in at least 3 of the 5. Any 3. They don't have to be the same 3 for each characteristics, but if at least 3 of the 5, I want you to be able to list that out on a piece of paper, like are you pre-writing or you're as you're preparing for this assignment, and then go ahead and turn that into an essay for me. All right. Now, um, what you would do, okay, is part of this assignment is seeing if you can find those characteristics in a way that allows you to quickly see them and to track the information. All right. So I would highly recommend that you do what's called a tracking chart. You can do it on a piece of paper. Just grab a pencil, and what you need to do then is you need to draw a column and a row. In fact, I should not do this because this is this can fail so fast. But um, it, I'm gonna go get a piece of paper, and then I'm gonna use a book here to show you an example of a tracking chart. Okay, so you can tell it's already getting a little weird because I'm leaving my chair and all that, and I probably blinded you with the light back there, but um, I need to get this video done, and I'm not in the right place to use a chalkboard, so I'll just go ahead and do this. So what I would do if I were you is I would just make, you know, start with that and put the first story on there. Okay, the first story is a problem, and then as you read the story, you know, this is the role for a problem. Make columns for everything that you think might be a general characteristic that other stories might share. Okay, so I'm going to make that as a row, and then here in a problem, I'll just put, well, right off the bat, right? This is a very general title, so I'm just gonna put that. They're general, abstract, you know, title. Okay, you know, I don't expect you to read that, but these are the characteristics. And these will be the stories, 5 stories here, and then you let these rows, excuse me, these columns grow as you keep on reading the stories. Because as I read a problem, I might come up with 7 or 8 of these characteristics, right? And obviously, because I'm using the story to tell me what sort of characteristics to put in the columns, every single one of these things is going to get a check mark. For example, as you read the story, you're going to realize it's a family problem. All right. Actually, they live in this big rich house with servants, so I'm going to go rich family. You know, and then they're all arguing about something that the young man did. So it's family problem. Family problem. There's a young man in trouble. So I'll put young man in trouble. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I'm looking at the details of the story, but then I'm sort of generalizing it. The young man has a name, but I'm not going to put the name there. I need to put young man in trouble because I need to make sure that when I get to the other story after this, I think it's three and one are one. Uh, will I be able to check mark those? Okay. So, I know already because I've worked with these stories that three and one on one is yes, that's an abstract title. Yes, it has a rich family. Yes, the family has a problem. Yes, well, young man's not in trouble, but the young man is confused. Okay, maybe I need to change this to young man is the focus of confusion or something like that, right? And now I know that for three and one on one we have it's a ghost story. So maybe for that one I'll put ghosts. Okay, sort of a weirdness, sort of a surreal thing. And obviously I'm going to put a check mark for that. You see, I have ghosts over here. But I'm not going to put a check mark for a problem because a problem doesn't have ghosts. But once I finish with a problem, I'll use three and one or one to keep going with the columns here, right? For example, three and one are one has an issue where the problem is solved in the light. So this young man goes and visits his childhood home at night and sees weirdness. Okay, you read the story, you figure out what I'm saying. In the daytime, everything is resolved. The light clears out the problem, and you'll see that. So I'm gonna put light as solution or clarifying light or whatever, but it's literal light. I mean, we're talking about sunlight. All right, so clarifying light. Okay, and yeah, definitely three and one has it, right? But you'll see in a problem that yeah, there's clarifying. There's a moment when the uncle is shoved under the street post and he gets clarity, and then there's a moment when the young man gets clarity of the problem. Okay, so with three and one on one, all of a sudden I'm obviously working with three and one on one now. I'm on my second story, but as I build columns for that, I'm going to go backward and say, oh, do I get to put a check mark here for a problem, the first story? And yeah, so I'll fill that out. Now I have a gap here, but I'm using three and one now to populate the columns. And as these columns get populated because of what's happening in three and one or one, I can also see if a problem is matching it as well. And so this is a very simple device. It's easy to do. Once you get a hang of it, you get the hang of it. But what it allows you to do is see all the common traits. And you could say, oh, like this one, four out of the five stories share it. This one, five of the five stories share it. This other one, two out of the five. So don't mention that one. But here's a three out of a five one, right? Now, sometimes you need to go back and clarify something here, right? Because for a problem and for three and one are one, you're going to realize that a family is arguing. Okay. But then for the third story of the five, it's called war. By the way, notice the abstract name. Okay, war. Um, as you read that, you realize that there's a very small village that's being evacuated, moved off through war. And the village itself is acting like a family. In fact, it has a mother figure in the center. All right. And there's a father figure that is battling with the mother figure. It's like a family. It's not a biological family, but it's a social family. So then you might be able to slip it under there and say, well, figuratively speaking, or in a general way, not a biological way, but war does have, a feuding family. And for me, because I've done this for a while, I use different like techniques to illustrate that. Like that's why I'm telling you this gets weird because I'm holding it up to the camera. But I wonder if you can see that for war, I have a dashed check mark either. I don't have a full check mark, but they're little dashes because that tells me that it's a different type of family, but it's a family nonetheless. By the way, war has an abstract name. War has a let's see, has some ghosts happening. Poof, I'm getting it all here. You see what I'm saying? So listen, this is what you have to do first. You can't just like read the five stories and then just wing it because you're going to write something that's weak. Um, but this will give you the interesting characteristics that are at play for the average Calligraph story, right? Again, you're not trying to find characteristics that every single one of them of the first 5 share, because your job in the essay is to describe the average Calligraph story. All right. And of course, when you go for the average, that means that, if you put your hand in the barrel and pull one out, the promise is they're going to share most of the traits, but every now and then they're not going to have exactly all those traits that you list, because we're dealing with averages. All right. So, and I also want you to remember the type of traits you have. I think you have 3 basically. First is the definitional trait. That means by definition, they all have to share this, which is they have to be in calligraph, they have to be short stories. You see what I'm saying? They're all fiction, so these are the definition categories. Now, when I said short stories, is like obviously they're short, but if you think about it, these stories are like really short. All of Calligraph stories are super short. They're short stories. Okay, so maybe I would throw that out there. But then the second level of traits are you have the strong traits, right? This is like the 4 out of 5 traits, the 5 out of 5 traits. Like, what if all 5 have general names? I don't know. You have to go read it and find out. But that's those are very strong. And then you have the weaker traits, but they're still the majority. They're still shared by 3 out of the 5 stories. You see what I'm saying? So I do see 3 levels of traits here. And I think the one that's going to be using the most of your textual space is going to be the middle one of the, well, no, the middle layer of the, 4 out of 5 traits, 5 out of 5 traits, and then also the 3 out of 5. I think that's where your development's going to be. Okay. Now, the other challenging thing about this is how are you going to refer to the stories? Well, the first time you mention a story, please use its whole name. Now, for a story like a problem, that's an easy thing to do because it's short. But short stories get their names placed in quotation marks, and be sure to capitalize them correctly. If you don't know how to capitalize that, just Google how do I capitalize a story title in MLA format. Okay. Or APA for what we're doing here is the same. Okay. Now, and the first time you mention a story, I would also like you to either in parentheses or someplace put the name of the author. All right. By the way, if you want to look at the dates, you're going to find another characteristic that all of these stories share. They're all in public domain. So that means that they're all published before 1923, before January 1st, 1923. So I don't really care if you put the dates, but I would like the author and the full name of the story the first time you mention it. Now, after that, if you want to abbreviate it, that's fine. Like 3 and 1 are 1. That's kind of a long story, right? And if I needed to refer to it a couple times into my essay, I right after I mention it the first time in parentheses, I might just put something like hereafter, comma 3, capitalize 3 and then put it in quotation marks. And that's telling your reader that you're using a shortened version of the title, an abbreviated version. And then from there on, you could just refer to it as 3. Or if you want to use initials and turn the names into acronyms, that gets a little awkward, especially if you have a lot of acronyms running around, because your audience is not going to remember what story you're talking about, probably. But if you have only one title that you turn into an acronym, right? Um, like, 3 and 1 are 1, I might just I might just go, T O or something. That actually I wouldn't, because that's kind of weird. But you can use the first letters of the main words, and that might work as well. You can. What I'm saying is you can figure out ways to abbreviate the stories as long as you let your reader know when the first time you use the full word, the full title, what the abbreviation is you're going to be using henceforth, and then you've earned the right to do that. So please check the written instructions for the length of the essay and whatnot. That's all there on the Word document that's going to be available to you. Thank you so much for watching the video.